the guys have told me that there's a game that's trending on the internet. So Smart Factory. What are the top 5 things that you would want to do?
If you don't know what problem you're solving for, is what data do you consult to know if the data is fit for purpose? That for me is
That's a safe point.
absolutely fundamental.
That is your way of visualizing the plant.
You don't go through this process once. It's also a continuous mindset process. You'll go through this process iteratively because the problems will also change.
Picking the use case is so important because you've got to go through this whole journey. And I think the point is what Google is saying and what you guys have experienced on the ground is not the same. What is AI?
Ability to manage complexity that we as humans cannot.
In developing countries, these kinds of technologies have a bigger opportunity. Maybe just share with us the journey. How did it start? How did it end up where you can actually say you've taken a foundry down to zero scrap, which is almost unheard of?
If somebody who also understands that work practices and improving those work practices is a journey and it's as important as improving the KPIs.
The journey is going to stay similar for any entity or problem or business case to some extent. Is how do you accelerate the journey?
You've got to get improvement in both axes to reach manufacturing excellence.
Everyone thinks that it's 4IR versus lean, but it's not.
It's not.
But how you educate people to realize that 4IR actually helps lean is a cost. So if you could paint the perfect champion company for DataProphet to approach, what would that look like?
The companies that needs us the most, meaning that needs to optimize or reduce scrap, is most likely the company that's the least ready, not always, but prototypically for this kind of solution.
You've hit the nail on the head because no matter what change might look like, it's still the ability to change.
You've got AI in your strategy and you've got a bunch of use cases. Then we do a maturity assessment. And that maturity assessment is extremely important.
Yeah. If you have the ability to change, you can then create the talent, the skills required.
A lot of this is a people thing.
Everyone says they can change, but in reality, probably the organizations that need you the most are the ones that are least able to change, even though they believe they can. So the guys have told me that there's a game that's trending on the internet. It's a, what is it called, Chris?
Tier list.
A tier list.
Wow. You can also say tier rank.
Tier ranking. And basically you have S, which is superior apparently. A is second, B, C, D, etc. And we've got a couple of technologies on the table here. I'll read them through and basically let's go through them one by one and decide, do they actually end up on the list? And obviously, most importantly, what's the most superior?
Right.
So what we've got here is computer vision, IoT, sensors and platforms, digital MES, because I guess you get manual MES as well, digital twins, anomaly detection. These are from Google, by the way. Kind of ask Google, if you were to implement a smart factory, what are the
top 10 things you
it's
need?
the top 20 things? Supply chain management, QA dashboards, AI, data analysis, predictive maintenance, cybersecurity, cloud computing platforms, CRM, sales stuff. So let's start with anomaly detection, because we're obviously speaking about quality. In your opinion, maybe let's talk about some examples of where you actually implemented anomaly detection.
Yeah,
If you have. Let's see where it goes. Let's put them all up here.
we typically do more of a analysis we call a SHAP analysis. It's a statistical method implemented to actually see what parameters has a proportional effect on your quality results. So a nice ranking tool in that sense. So it's not necessarily anomaly detection. Okay. What we do is, which is a nice visual way, is we do extract profiles from, let's say there's a pressure curve in your pressure die cosmos. Now you can see an anomaly curve very quickly because we now plot for you your perfect curve. So we like to obviously, again, to augment, make it visual. So anomaly detection on a visual basis, that pressure profiles we extract. And it's very interesting because a lot of customers, you have the data, but you don't have the capabilities internally to make that data into a meaningful profile in being able to visualize it.
So we'll park that one then.
And also in prescriptive maintenance. So you're analyzing a couple of parameters in a particular machine and you want to see which ones behave, out of the ordinary.
Okay. So if I touch on if I just pick up what you said, so obviously there's a challenge of being able to collect the data from sensors into sort of commonized platform. You alluded to that, right?
So just for me to help with ranking, what's the criteria of
So
success
if
here?
you were to set up a smart factory, wave your magic wand, right?
So-
Smart factory. What are the top 5 things that you would want to do and make sure that, or what are the top 5 things you'd implement?
So we're looking at a prototype, no contextual explicit problem that we need to solve for. I have a factory I'm designing. We average in every aspect.
No.
how do we-
Let's get
Oh,
specific.
sorry.
I think it's a good point. You spoke about a brewery.
Right.
So we're making beer. It's a process manufacturing plant. It exists. You don't have to build a plant from zero. But they're in that opportunity of where you think they would have a big impact if you could deploy your AI prescriptive tools. So let's paint that picture. So what are the top 5 things you think that you would want to implement that they would need to be implemented? Not necessarily first, but in terms of importance.
It's a very difficult question because, and it came up in your interview with Peter, is you've got to start at the problem or the use case. And that's probably the best place to start.
Okay, we need a
and
cookie.
then think about which technologies are going to solve those problems,
Yeah.
rather than looking at the technology per se.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
Because we actually stumbled a bit on a high problem in a sense that if you don't know what you're solving for, any one of them can be
So
good.
okay, I'm going to
or
put you
worse,
know what the problem is.
exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Know what the problem is, and
Yeah.
then you mentioned AI. For AI, you need data. So that's pretty much probably where you'd
Yeah.
start.
So where was it?
IoT and sensors and
Yes.
platforms,
Yeah,
but
that's-
also digital MES. I just want to make sure I understand that one correctly. It's paper-based to
Yeah, to
Not-
digital. So this is telling the line what to do, recording what the line did.
that for me is
No, it's also important.
absolutely fundamental.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's just put them here. Let's get the 5. So this is know the problem, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, my skew writing. Okay, know the problem. I think that.
I'd say there's a stage before that.
Okay.
Is know what your corporate strategy is and what your objectives are. So if it's cost reduction, then you work down to the use cases and the problems that will address that.
Okay. Yeah. So let's just corp strategy. Eh?
Yeah.
And let me give quickly good examples why this is important just as a base layer. We do a very thorough exercise where Hiram alluded to the maturity assessment, but a big part of that is the AI readiness.
Yeah.
If you don't know what problem you're solving for, is what data do you consult to know if the data is fit for purpose?
Yeah.
If you go shotgun approaches, you're going to spend a lot of time fixing something that doesn't need fixing in the long run.
Yeah.
Why this is very important. What do we typically play in the space of quality data? If you collect data on let's say some of our customers said, because they're measuring OEE only at the end of the shift,
Yeah.
they have no discretion of what happens to quality during the shift.
During the shift.
Now you want to train an AI model to predict
On the-
quality, but you can only do it on shift level. So you lose a lot of discretion. So digital MES and also what it encapsulates, meaning that you have more granular information at the right points, is a very important piece to this puzzle as well.
Yeah.
And traceability in this.
So
either
the
batch ID or product
100%.
ID.
So that just shows you when you Google what it says. Right. It said this stuff.
Okay.
But in reality, it's very different. And hopefully we can update Google
Yeah.
to actually say what you said. So I mean, let's not force it in, right? So if you say corporate strategy, obviously that then aligns to know the problem. You said granular data, eh?
Yeah. And that
Or-
we can say it embodies IoT and digital
Yeah.
MES in its spirit, but it's not the explicit, but yeah.
Details.
It's probably know the problem and the use cases, and then to Jan's point, what data do you need?
Use case.
Because now, let's say you want to solve a quality problem, but if you don't have quality data, a very extreme example, you cannot solve it
Yeah.
perfect for data. That's
Yeah, exactly. So now we've got details. I'll just make a note here of I'll put these two together, kind of
So
together.
it's the integrity and veracity of data coming in, basically. Is it fit for purpose?
Yeah.
Data. And
So this is almost a fitness of data. Because there's maybe a slide I should have added, but we I always refer to the 3 dimensions of value realization. It's technology, data, people, process, and system. And all 3 need to overlap before you get value out of any implementation.
So
of this common nature.
what's interesting here is that step 2 is actually about technology and not even AI yet.
Yeah.
This is just getting the foundation.
Yeah,
that we spoke about, right?
no
So-
golden roof yet.
Yeah.
So what's the definition of a smart factory? Because, yeah, because
We kind of left it open because we
Yeah.
Googled. We basically put into Google, give us the top 20 things that we need to do to get a smart factory going. And
Right.
these are the things that it said.
right,
And I think the point is what Google is saying and what's the talk in the town and what you guys have experienced on the ground is not the same.
yeah,
And I think that's obviously what's coming out here. And I'm
Yeah.
glad that it is because it's you guys are talking from realistic, practical
Mhm.
adoption of tech. And you're saying corporate strategy is the most important. Know the problem, know the use case, and then you get the foundational stuff right,
Mhm.
which is contextual data, granular contextual data.
I think the next one is fair to say cloud computing, because now
yeah,
you add context to data. How do you make it retrievable, accessible? How can you use this asset now with scale and ease and effectiveness? And they're obviously cloud, so this goes through edge, then to what we call our connect data store. That's an important factor. Then
probably AI data.
I would
analysis
add
tools.
cybersecurity with this.
I mean,
together.
this me almost says enable, or just you have to have
You
it.
have to
But
have it, yeah.
kind of, it's doesn't make it great or not, but if you don't have that, you're in the wrong,
you're
in
in
the wrong
trouble.
game, basically. Yeah.
Probably analysis tools or QA dashboards.
What I like is I saw QA dashboards. It's not necessarily just quality, but first step is the visualization of
to
data.
visualize that data.
Yeah, so I'll just say
And this is a bit part of A as well, is to add context to data. You need to visualize it as the first step.
Yeah,
And what our data science team does very well is to explain to the customer through visualization of this also, where's the gaps, what do we need, where's the foundational fixes. But this is a very cool tool because now it's value adding almost through all these steps. If you think about it, just the simple fact of
seeing is believing. It's just
Seeing
not
is
some
believing,
numbers in
yeah.
a computer.
yeah,
and that's exactly why we have Connect Web as part of our technologies. How do you visualize on an easy, repeatable way? It's contextual to all.
Okay.
yeah,
all
and,
these
you,
steps
and we
as
also
well.
saw during COVID how supply chains had to be more resilient.
Yeah.
And so there's this thing around, the control towers and being able to visualize the supply chain end to end. That is almost your way of visualizing the plant process, end to end.
Yeah, from in to out of the factory.
Exactly. So that's going to give you resilience to be able to just see that.
And then this is not necessarily least important, but it's the last step in it is where the analytics tools, as typically data analysis tools, you can also call anomaly detection. We call it 2 things. There's the feature engineers, engineered feature, feature engineers on the front page. No, engineered features. So add intelligence. It's the intelligence layer to this now strong foundation. So now we start to consider the golden roof solutions at this stage. So sometimes in the form of AI, sometimes it's a profile being extracted, sometimes it's a smart alarming on data, anomaly detection in
An
a
alarm
different
off
way.
this dashboard, for example.
And those 3, so predictive maintenance, digital twins, AI, computer vision, is going to use this stuff.
Yeah.
So I think those
I think computer vision
those
is
are
a bit of a
bolt-ons.
different.
It's almost at a data collection.
Yeah,
point.
it's
correct.
We don't, to be honest, play in that space really that much.
It basically feeds into data collection.
Yeah. It's gonna use
CRM, nobody's interested in sales, right? But I guess CRM feeds into knowing the problem potentially. Let's say
for me,
this tells you your corporate strategy.
I'm very
almost.
excited if you can add data sources, and if you add different data sources with different perspectives, you can get unique pictures out of it. But it again defines the use case must dictate what actually put into the system.
So Yanesh, I would put supply chain management at the top there as well, because factories don't exist in isolation. So they've got the supply side, they've got the incoming raw materials, and often their customer is the planning department in supply chain, and that tells you what the problem is. So one of them might be meeting the production plan.
Our customer wants double this order of the most difficult part to make. Now all of a sudden it becomes your
So it's almost,
primary.
as I say, these things are almost above that, right?
Yeah. It informs us. We have a customer that
Kind of
is
linked to the CRM. The customer saying double the volume.
Yeah.
possible bad material from a supplier. How do you identify that? If now you have a process drift or something that occurs, historic data is a great way to see if that is an anomaly in the pattern of expected behavior or not.
So would anomaly detection fit in here, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the nice kind of golden roof solutions once the foundation is in
And
place.
predictive maintenance is also
Probably there as well. Digital twin maybe
Digital
as well.
twin, I think, is in concept a bit of a different
I'll leave it off.
principle. Yeah.
Everyone has different definitions of what that is.
Yeah.
There's great companies that does that. I would not say we play in that space necessarily. That's
But it's different definitions of
Yeah.
what it is. Like all of these things, I guess.
yeah.
But I think it comes back to, again, our lived experience. It really starts up here. And this is a human thing. It's
So
not a
you-
technology thing.
It's very much even.
Because this might mean, listen, an Excel sheet will work for you.
Yeah.
Or WCM will work,
exactly.
or whatever it
Better
is.
suited.
And I'm putting myself in the customer's shoes now. Let's also be honest. This is very value adding because it lays the foundation if you get to this stage to have repeat success.
Yes.
It's 50% of the journey. That's point maybe 3 or 2 if you're lucky on that graph we
Yeah.
showed. How do we make it easier for the customer to know where they're at in that journey
Yeah.
and how to measure? Show me what you measure and I'll show you what the behavior on site is. So through these tools also, we can now measure our progress towards the best of best as well. And what I always say is you don't go through this process once. It's also a continuous mindset process. You'll go through this process iteratively because the problems will also change. But once you foster this capability with the technology as a customer, now you become, you
And I guess-
differentiate yourself
and I think-
from your peers in that sense.
Yeah, Hiram, you mentioned it. Picking the use case is so important because no matter how small the use case is, you got to go through this whole journey.
No.
And to get to the point where it actually has an impact on the business after all of this stuff, even if it's the smallest use case, is difficult.
Yeah.
Because that's a change management thing. That's a culture that has to evolve. And if you pick a use case that's too convoluted and too many people involved, I guess, it becomes difficult to show what success is.
Yeah, and also if you work through the corporate strategy and look at a basket of use cases, it gives you a very good clue around what A, B, and C, and D should be,
Yeah.
and how you build that strategy as a company.
And to maybe put differently, the customers, you asked that question that gets me the most excited is the customers that build the fitness and ability to go through this journey in a quick and repetitive way as well.
It's then obviously once you've got this, knowing the problem is again different.
Because you want to solve for a problem by ending it. What can we leverage this capability and technology to solve next for?
Yeah, in fact, the irony of it is AI is going to tell you more problems,
Yeah.
but very specifically what they are and potentially how to improve it. Whereas they probably don't even know those problems exist.
For me, a company
that's a
or a
critical
customer
point.
that has this ability or this fitness, that's an absolute pleasure. You can almost, that engineering mind gets happy because now we're getting to.
And Johan will attest to it. He sees it every day, and that's, again, harping on the journey thing. Once you get the data and you start working through this thing, a year down the line, you could find out what the other use cases are, what the other problems are. And that's why it's such an important journey and so important to have the senior stakeholders involved who know the business and know the processes in detail, because you will spot all the other issues. And then that journey just evolves.
100%.
Because we came to customers where we realize at this stage that your quality data is inaccurate. So all your continuous improvement has been focused on the wrong aspect of your business. It's a big pause and reflection moment. Let's not continue down here and also use the organization. Let's not run forward until we solved for the problem at this level.
Exactly.
And that's just one example of value add is in every step here. We
Of
tend
course.
to believe the value add only comes here, but the real
I
value
think
add is in
step
all.
C is massive. Just
Yeah.
visualization of the end-to-end operation in the factory is massive. Massive.
You might get through a situation where, you think scrap reduction or whatever the case is the use case, and then you keep referring to the corporate strategy and you see that, one of the biggest objectives is probably volume or yield.
Yeah.
And so some of the use case, if you reduce scrap, for instance, you'll get more volume. But if that's your starting point, yield or throughput, then you're going to have a number of different use cases. One of them is scrap reduction, other one might be cycle time reduction.
Exactly.
And you're going to discover those things as you can, to your point around C, if you can visualize the data and see what it's telling you.
Yep.
And there's different storylines playing out. Also, if you have this powerful capability, imagine now you can optimize AI. It doesn't matter if you just want to look at quality. You can optimize, let's say, quality and throughput. Where do I get the most throughput, but still a decent amount of quality? Depending on what parts you make. If it's a very expensive part to inspect, you just reduce engine blocks. Typically, you don't want to send that away without achieving quality. If I maybe make disc brakes, throughput might be a bit more important than quality.
Yeah, exactly.
You can start to make informed trades off.
So spending time qualifying the use case as you said,
important.
It's so important as opposed to just diving in and doing stuff. Maybe just tell me more about your histories and how you ended up sitting here from at DataProphet. I don't know, whoever wants to go first.
Haram, go first.
Yeah, I mean, so like you, I studied at UCT, and then I got through my undergrad and my supervisor. I don't know if you remember Michael Ings.
Yeah.
So already back in that time, I was looking for a subject to do the master's on, and that's where my interest, I think, in AI kind of started to flourish. Where he said there's this thing called neural networks, things like a human brain. Do you want to use it to help the South African Navy identify ship targets using radar profiles? So shit, that's really cool. I mean, damn, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's essentially where I started to pick that up, and then spent a lot of my life in, some of it in banking, mostly in management consulting, and then in manufacturing. So SAB Miller, AB InBev, mainly in supply chain, and then in manufacturing, looking after some of the malt factories across Africa. And I think when I left in 2018, there was a lot of talk now about AI globally. Us engineers, we understand the maths behind the stuff. So I thought, well, there must be a way I can understand this machine learning stuff and use my degree together with my manufacturing experience. And there was a great combination of skills. And that's kind of how I ended up at DataProphet. And one of our big strategies is to partner in a bigger AI ecosystem. As you know, there are many different players in this AI ecosystem. One player can't do all of it.
Yep.
So one of our strategies is to partner with the right companies, and GenderMark. I saw the podcast with Atlantis, and I immediately knew that GenderMark is probably somebody we should start talking to, and saw the podcast, and your question, how are we sitting here? I thought, how can we get involved with you, at least from a podcast perspective, and then chat later around how we can collaborate. So that's why we're sitting here.
Definitely some opportunities. Interestingly, I started my master's. I didn't finish. I did all the hard work and just couldn't write the paper on fuzzy logic. When I finished my undergrad, it was a hot topic to kind of get, rather than neural networks, which I didn't even know much about that back then, but to use fuzzy logic to kind of have a triangular decision matrix as opposed to a linear one that we had before. It was it was digital. Either this is the range and then that's the output, or this is the range and that's the output, and or gates. Yeah. Whereas with fuzzy logic, it's kind of almost there. Plus, this one is here, then make a decision. It's like, remember we used to have fuzzy logic washing machines?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the washing machines are
the precursor to neural networks.
Yeah.
I wish I finished it. I only sort of had a piece of paper to my name, but it was pretty interesting. My prof was Prof. Tapson.
I remember him. Yeah. Okay.
Still in contact with him, actually.
Nice.
Well, so for myself, I did my mechanical engineering degree at Tux. I did my honors in metallurgical engineering. Don't really ask me why. I just at that stage I was the way is anything will break at some stage, and metal is typically
why the Titanic sank, right?
But I really enjoyed it. It's a great also science, just how empirical information actually It's not necessarily you can always explain the exact results, but through enough testing experiments, you can have enough empirical information to predict the results. So also relevant to some extent. I was between my undergrad and honours, got a bursary at a big South African petrochemical company, spent my years working there. There I quickly realized that they have so much data that's being underutilized, and I kind of carved a career through the different stages of my career there as well as how do I leverage data as an asset. And that's just a skill I developed profusely in that time, because there's so much opportunity still out there to do things. But again, it comes back to bring the context to the data and then start to solve for that. After a few years there, also did my MBA in that. Also like to solve a problem holistically. We spoke about it earlier today. There's a technical solution, but there's always also a business solution that you have to bring that perspective to any problem you're solving for.
Yeah.
So that's through that, also through those journeys, ended up at DataProphet. And why I'm sitting here today is just Harm gave me a call and said, we're going to talk to Mark. Yes, I feel like we were always traveling, and then all of a sudden myself and Harm find each other, and we're either talking to a customer or CEO or somebody, and I always like to see where Harm takes me next for conversation as well. So, yeah.
Cool. What is AI? It's a hot topic. It's a buzzword. But unlike most organizations and most individuals, you, for the last 7-8 years, have actually used AI, practically speaking, to make a difference in factories. In your opinion, what is AI?
Oh, geez. Harm, do you want to kick off or should I?
Difficult question.
No, let me
go
go. So, yes, it's, as with anything, there's a lot of hype, but when there's a lot of hype, there's obviously a lot of interpretation of what it can mean. My AI in concept, we all know what it stands for, but it's using data to teach something, to do something to a level never previously available to us. I think also we all know with the increase in computational capacity, you have bigger data sets, bigger means to do that, and also loosely based on neural networks, not loosely, but it's based on neural networks, meaning that it emulates a biological process of learning. Yep. Where previously just in a logical state was very easy to write something in an if-y statement, logical. Now we can have something that can infer from a data set learning that it can be repeated. So it's not logical statements is being followed, it's something that can learn and execute from previous experience, to make it simple.
Yeah.
And that's something new. That's normally something that resided in the human space. Now it has moved to a technology space. And that's fundamental for us as humanity in a bigger level as well. The downside of AI to another side is logic is very nice. If you just think about a linear regression, that's these days also called machine learning, and that's a level of AI. Yeah. Still interpretable. And I think that's where a lot of distinction in my mind comes in. If we talk about AI, do we talk about the class that's supervised and it's interpretable, so I can understand the results, or are we talking about the AI where I give an input, I get an output, but I don't know what happened in the middle?
Yep.
So in the space and the way we apply it is the latter, or meaning we cannot interpret it. The big value of that AI is just the ability to manage complexity that we as humans cannot. Yep. We can typically judge 3 or 4 or 5 concepts. If you just think of a typical correlation graph, you can maybe add a dimension by making the bubbles bigger or smaller, or even add a different axis. If you go to dimensions above that, how do you solve for that problem as an engineer, as a person, as whoever? You cannot. AI solves that problem for you. You can add so much dimensions to the problem that previously you couldn't. And I think that's the big step, especially in our space, is you don't consider just 4 or 5 different parameters. Now you can evaluate 100, 200, you infinite amount of parameters you can analyze in one space. And that's how I would contextualize AI in our space, is making big dimension problems interpretable.
Yeah. So let me try and summarize that, just so I get what you're saying. Is you're obviously saying there's different levels of AI, machine learning, let's say supervised kind of learning, where you can actually see the logic through it. But what you're talking about, the space that you play in, is where Excel can't do it.
Yeah.
There's too many parameters that get muddled up in some algorithm, and out comes an output that can help improve a particular process, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes. And maybe to articulate better, both has its place.
Yeah. Yeah.
To also be clear.
Yeah.
But it is exciting, and I think this is where a lot of the hype is focused about AI is this level where you have so much dimensionality to the problem that you can actually push something to algorithms that was previously not solvable.
Yeah.
So unsolvable problems by technology now become solvable problems with technology. And I think that's a big leap, especially in the manufacturing space as well. So it opens a new analytic tool to customers as well to analyze a previously potentially unsolvable problem as well.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Hiram, maybe if I could preface my question, what is AI? But maybe if I could add to it, if I'm a plant manager of a factory, why should I care?
Yeah.
Rather than repeating the what is AI question. If I'm a plant manager, why should I say, hey, Hiram, I need some help?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, Jan said most of it around what AI is, but I think there are different forms of AI, as you said. There's robotics as well. There's intelligent automation. There's a whole bunch of other forms, and they form this. I mean, there's machine learning, there's neural networks. And why I would care as a plant manager is that it's a different form of intelligence, right? And often, from a global perspective, we get too hung up around trying to copy the human intelligence. It's a different form of intelligence. There are many things that humans are very good at, and there are many things that humans are really bad at, to be honest, and many things that machines are good at. So computing things very quickly when there are many different, when there's a complex multidimensional problem. So I think what we probably need to focus on is what are the good things, what are the things that humans are good at, and what are the things that machines are good at.
Yeah.
So why the plant manager would care is that when you combine these two forms of intelligence, you get a form of intelligence that's better than the sum of those two.
Yes.
And I think when you combine machines and human beings together in terms of that intelligence, you get something that's super valuable. And so if you look at today, many manufacturers and plant managers have many challenges like growth, productivity, workforce development, sustainable manufacturing. And I think you need to harness the things that machines are really good at and combine it with the intelligence that humans are very good at to meet those challenges. And often one of the big challenges is cost reduction.
Yeah.
So we mentioned about machines being able to compute things much faster. So if you can reduce the cycle time in an operation or reduce the defects in a manufacturing plant, you reduce the cost substantially. So that's essentially why I think a plant manager should care. And then also, manufacturers are under pressure, especially in Europe and the US. So the workforce is dwindling, and institutional knowledge is another issue.
Yeah.
So people come, Gendermark's been around for 30 years. You get guys learning about what happens in the factory floor, and then they leave. So AI is something that can restore that institutional knowledge, and you can use that intelligence to augment what the human is doing and do something even better and faster in a factory.
Now that's very powerful. I never thought about it as a storage of your institutional knowledge. You have that really experienced person that knows press this, then do that, and it works somehow. How you can digitize that knowledge is a really powerful need.
Yeah. So one of our customers at the moment, when we often discuss different use cases with him, and one of his biggest needs was, I've got different operators in the plant. They all come to work with the different black books. They all enter their different recipes for the controllers, and then they leave. And a typical industry, I think, where you'll see this is in brewing. So the brewmaster is the king, and the brewmaster's often been around for 10, 20 years, 30 years. And they, through their intuition and their experience, know how the brewing process really works. When that brewmaster leaves, you have an issue.
Well, yeah.
Now, how do you implement those recipes consistently again? So, and that's where you need to start thinking about smart technology.
Are you saying those recipes have got so many parameters that it becomes almost intuitive as to what the settings should be?
Exactly.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
But take that example, a metaphor to build on. There's things that's measurable as a simple concept, and then some things that's not that measurable. So let's take temperature as a simple example. Either you have a probe to measure it or not.
Yeah.
If it's measured, we can, at least with AI, correlate or see the patterns in the behavior to say, we adjust this if it's a hard day to make sure the mix is correct. And that's where that institutional knowledge in the measurable state can be captured. And that brings me back to the point of augmentation is there's always going to be variance in any process. So through measurement firstly, and then applying AI on what you can measure or identifying the patterns, you can reduce the variance in a large portion of your process. That's why the plant manager should care. Doesn't mean you're going to solve all your problems, but any variance, the Six Sigma model in simple terms, any variation of results, you can narrow that distribution is a great gain from both cost, productivity. It adds to all of that. So to put it differently, why should a production manager care or the operations managers? How do I reduce variance of output? This is a very powerful tool to do that. And it's to build on what Chaim said. And also, if you think about it, is why should you care? What is a fundamental process? Doesn't matter what you make or what business you are in. It's the concept of continuous improvement. If you're not fit as an organization to improve yourself, because you will have to change, the world around us doesn't stand still, you need to be fit to change. And that's been, there's a lot of great examples in industry we can highlight from that. But this is through the process of digitalization, it should optimize or improve a process. And if you improve your process of continuous improvement, because that touches a lot of points of what these technologies help with, is first, it improves your planning. It makes sure you address the 20%, the do is focused on the right thing. It actually fosters the ability to check and act. Checking is one of the hardest parts of the PDCA cycle, if you think about it, because I can make a change, but how do I know if it's effective? How can I see what was effective from my past historical operations? Normally you'll have to ask EIT or engineer to go through heaps of data to identify that pattern. If you can optimize your PDCA route, that's a great gain for organization. That also builds robustness for you as a organization. If you improve that through the technologies available, if you improve that process. For me, that's a primary reason I would care as operations managers.
Makes perfect sense. I'm actually busy writing a white paper basically that talks about how these new digital technologies are not a replacement for Lean or Six Sigma.
No,
they're actually augmenting them and actually taking them to new heights. Where I think people think it's this versus that. I'm not sure where that comes from.
No, that's a subject that I'm very passionate about. So you've got your world-class manufacturing, and then you've got these 4-hour technologies, and there's a lot of talk now. There isn't a lot. To your point, there's actually very little literature around how the two converge. And I saw something from BCG that says if they do, just vanilla WCM, they get about 20% cost reduction. If you do 4-hour, you get a 20%. If you augment the two, you get around 40%. And there's two ways to augment them. The one is you can use data, as Johan was saying, to improve the efficiency of those, like PDCA, or you take autonomous maintenance. If you apply data to that process and they can find what's going to happen to the machine in the future, then you can streamline that autonomous maintenance process. And then the other way around augmentation, which is why I want to see the paper that you're writing, is the change management bit that Johan spoke about. Change management in the factory is not your normal change management, because you've got to change SOPs, processes, you've got to realign KPIs. So you've got to understand WCM in the manufacturing environment to be able to implement change management for 4-hour.
Yes. It is. It is a very complex thing to change things in a factory. People are, like most humans, are stuck in a certain in their ways, and also there's lots of compliance challenges around just changing things, especially in medical devices and the pharmaceutical industry. You can't just decide to change something. Because of obviously the potential impact and all that kind of stuff. But I'm also really passionate about that. The idea of using digital to help Lean, help Six Sigma. We've got one production line where we measure, we assemble components, and there's probably 1,500 quality measures on this particular production line. And we do a live CPK. So now we have a live CPK of the last 50 parts. It's very easy to project what CPK is going to be tomorrow. So then if I'm out of range, I can proactively solve solve the problem before CPK goes out of whack. It's a
exactly.
simple, it's not rocket science, but you're trying to lean into an existing process
Yeah.
because they're already measuring CPK.
Yeah.
And now you're just saying, take away the admin burden and I'm doing it for you live.
Yeah. I mean, there's some, and I won't talk about, brands or companies, but there's, we talk about world-class manufacturing and lean again. Some companies using AI to predict when the next safety incident is going to happen at a particular plant.
That's a great use case.
Massive help.
Massive.
But sorry, I just want to mention what I love what you said also is, let's not reinvent the terminology in a sense. Because what we kind of, and it's also human nature, there's two conceptual different things, but once you augment it, it's the same process, just easier, better, more accuracy, whatever the outcome of that is, it makes it so much more palatable for the manufacturer as well than this intimidating change of the way we work. Let's rather postulate it as a way to improve how we're working.
Yeah. I know how controversial this is, but I blame the consultants for that. The hype around selling the future, you can really hype it up, but actually digitizing Six Sigma, it's not like a massive step. And then using predictive models to predict what the CPK is going to be is not rocket science.
No.
So, but it's been, I think they've oversold it without any practical experience on the ground. I always tell our team upstairs that are the development team that develop these software things that unless you've done your time with safety shoes, then you don't fit in here. You got to have done your time on the ground
Totally agree.
to be able to have an opinion on what should be implemented on the ground.
Experience, plus reflection, that's the two elements that you need to.
100%. What I wanted to mention was when I first heard, I think we visited Atlantis Foundries, which is where I first heard about DataProphet. And the guys at Atlantis told me about this, this thing that they've created that has now reduced scrap to almost zero at the customer, significantly reduced scrap internally. I was like, that's nonsense. I mean, they've been sold the dream.
Yeah.
Visited a couple of other times, a few other times, and then they said, no, we've actually done it. Have a look. And I was like, this is impossible. This is 4 or 5 years ago. I'm like, who did this? And they said DataProphet. And what really struck me was that you guys solved the problem. You didn't sell a technology. The technology you used was obviously AI, but you solved the problem, which is really fundamental to me, because at that point in time, that's when the hype was really at its peak of all of these fancy things, but no real practical outcome on the ground. And I was really shocked and pleasantly surprised to see what DataProphet had achieved at Atlantis Foundries. So I was like really excited to get you guys to come visit and obviously get you on the podcast. Maybe just share with us the journey. How did it start? How did it end up where you can actually say that you've taken a foundry, which is probably one of the most complex processes, the process that is really difficult to control, down to zero scrap, which is almost unheard of. I'd appreciate the journey if you could. I know you've got a couple of slides to share, but maybe we can use the slides as a guide.
Yeah. Do you want to, or should I?
Go. I'll jump in now.
Yeah, so we started in 2014, long before my time at DataProphet, and most of the understanding is that DataProphet started with consulting work. So there's stuff that they did in the automotive sector using computer vision, which you guys are using as well.
Yeah.
And then I think Atlantis was probably one of the first projects, and you hit the nail on the head, as Peter kind of said in the podcast. Started with solving a problem first rather than using the technology for the sake of it. I mean, I remember his sentence: "We don't do AI," so they use it as a tool. And so I think it morphed into. I mean, I don't know enough about that part of the history, but eventually where we became experts in the prescriptive area, prescriptive analytics. And so if I use an analogy, so you've got descriptive and diagnostic, typically your BI type stuff.
Yep.
So how did it, what happened in the plant, or how did it happen? And then if you know what happened and how it happened, then you can possibly predict when it's going to happen again, and that's your predictive analytics. And when I say morphed, we now play in the prescriptive space. So if I use an analogy of driving your car, and I say to you, drive into the corners at 60 k's an hour, drive onto the highway at 100 k's an hour, I'm essentially giving you a recipe to optimize the life of the vehicle and the use of the fuel.
Yep.
As an example. So that's typically what we do. So in the factory, you've got a control plan. And if the control plan runs perfectly, then you have perfect yield, perfect quality. And so what we really do is we automate that part of the control plan. And essentially you can optimize quality, you can optimize yield, output, and we even do multi-dimensional, multi-parameter optimization. So that's where we ended up, and that's now our focus. So we even did a little bit of predictive maintenance, prescriptive maintenance type stuff, but now we focused on prescriptive optimization. And yeah, so as the presentation shows, we've
Can
got,
I show maybe
yeah.
build on Atlantis, maybe just a different view on the Atlantis Foundry, and it's core to what we do is, if you just think about the concept of best or perfect manufacturing excellence, top corner of manufacture, how do you achieve best of best operations every day? I mean, who doesn't want to be
Of
there?
course.
So how do you solve
That's
that
why
problem?
that's why
I mean,
plant managers should care.
Yeah.
Exactly.
How do you, if you just quickly pause, and Atlantis is a great example of this, is there's always, we've talked about a concept of variance. There's always going to be something. So some things is controllable, some things is not. So first step we do at a customer is what can we actually influence, what's critical to influence, because that subject matter expertise must be built into as where this will always be a bit of a consulting journey to some extent. That being said, the great thing we're able to do is now we have all these parameters and different variants. What does good look like if we analyze your past patterns? Now the next question becomes, can we repeat that? And now the consultation with the customer also starts. But now we can even go further in optimization as if you hit this zone, this is the type of scrap you're going to make. So which ones are less detrimental, which ones are better, which ones can you tune out, which ones not? In going through that process of what's achievable, what's sustainable, you cannot achieve that with classical methods.
No.
If you look at all that historic context or data, you cannot see those patterns. But by seeing those regions and operations, knowing how they look like and what the cause and effect, how it will play out, meaning if we operate here, we'll get these type of defects. It's such a powerful tool for Peter and his team to actually now go and say, but our problem might be here. This is the region of our operations we need to improve.
Yeah.
What additional action plans? And now you give targets for your operators and supervisors to chase that you have historic backing that will give you the biggest probability of good performance. That's a very powerful lever.
Yeah, that's basically the automating the problem solving part. And now they're focusing on implementing.
Exactly.
As opposed to what happened and what should I do, and which is what most engineers spend time in the plant doing, as opposed to implementing a solution.
Again, using the PDCA framework, if I'm stuck in a P part and I've done 2 years of collecting data, now I can only start to analyze.
It's too late.
It's too late.
It's way too late. If
It's
you're
too
collecting
late.
tomorrow, it's too late.
yeah.
And now, as a change, you can also see, and now we have the concept what we call compliance. And that's another thing that scales again of this concept of augmentation of abilities is, I have a great control plan now. That's maybe 30% of the problem solved. How do you know if it's being executed?
Yeah.
You have to measure constantly, and we call that concept compliance. Here's your best of best plan. Are we able to achieve it?
Yeah.
And now the problem solving gets focused to what's our obstacles to achieving this best of best operations.
Yeah.
And now you make meaningful changes in your operations because we have the credibility and confidence now. This is how good looks like. What's preventing us from achieving it? And now that's very interesting with customer engagements. What gremlins and problems gets uncovered by having this perspective. You talked about perspective. It brings such a great perspective of some things that might have seemed like a superficial problem previously now becomes problem number one in this factory.
Yeah, it's always going to be a consultation process, yeah?
Yeah, and I mean, it was a lot of, going back to the Atlantis story, it was a lot of cost for them. So, you get a defective engine block, they ship it to the client, the client sees it and then ships it back. So it's a massive logistics cost.
They quarantine the whole batch and it gets interesting.
And then you talk about sustainability. So there's, CO2 emissions in the whole logistics supply chain.
Yeah.
So, and we were able to Jan's point, reduce that scrap significantly. Yeah. And the trick is to keep it there.
Yeah, I think that's the trick. And that you say you have what does best look like today?
Yeah, you keep the plant there. And the other thing we do really well is and I'm sure Johan will talk about this with Zest later on, is the unified view. So we build, so if you characterize a process with parameters, so hundreds or thousands of parameters, we take those parameters and we almost stitch it with the quality parameters, so you can tell from the raw materials how the raw materials transform through the process and how you get the final product and the quality of that product and the yield and the throughput and so on. We create that entire thing to represent the entire process and sometimes the entire plant. So if you think through root cause analysis,
Yeah.
that's essentially what you're doing all the time for that particular problem. We're doing it for the whole process or the whole set of sub-processes and sometimes the whole plant.
Wow.
And so we don't actively do it for the client. We actually did it to feed the AI with the data.
It becomes a byproduct.
Becomes a byproduct.
Yeah.
But when
But
you
it's
have
so critical.
Such a value add byproduct.
it's a massive value add, because when you see the data and you can visualize it through one of our products is Connect, even that gives you, you can track.
I want to jump on it. Why not? But this concept of traceability is key in this now. But if you just think about any forms of analytics or diagnostics you want to do, you need to match the event with the outcome.
Yeah.
How do you do that in a big factory with, you might have all the data, but how do I stitch together where this part traversed through my process?
Yeah.
If you have a nice dot metric system or whatever, tagging might be a lot easier, but let's also be honest, many customers, you don't have that.
Yeah.
Traceability is the key thing you have to solve for in your data. Having data doesn't make it valuable.
Context.
Context and traceability is a big part, the biggest part, in my opinion, of the data context that you need to bring. Now, you can do any diagnostics with, you can go all the way from descriptive to all the way to prescriptive by bringing traceability to the data. And that's a big value add, because it opens up all these analytic avenues that you can now leverage in whatever process or reason. Short-term, reactive, long-term planning, a lot of avenues that's open up.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's why getting the foundation right is so important. I mean, I talk about the golden roof on a shack. So you can put whatever golden roof on a shack. If you don't have the foundation right, which is your method of data collection, your context attached to the data, those foundational elements, you can put whatever golden roof you want on your shack. Your shack's going to fall down.
Yeah.
I think that's such an important point.
And I mean, back to your question around, the journey and how we got to where we are. You've got a client in Atlantis, as an example, that understands. We were talking about it earlier today.
Yeah.
Is that this whole AI thing is a journey, and it's a big journey.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been at it for 5 or 6 years or whatever the case is. So, and you've got a CEO who understands the processes in detail and understands how data can help the plant, and how to combine the intelligence that AI has with what the humans in that plant do to reduce scrap from wherever it was. And they paid, they used to pay penalties to the automotive sector for those defective engines.
Yeah.
I think that journey has helped us also evolve by seeing what the customer really needs.
Yeah, it's always good to build a business with the customer. You don't get stuck in your crazy ideas. You get stuck in ideas that add value.
Yeah.
I think critical to the success of any project in an organization is having the right champion. And as you guys kind of mentioned a few times now, implementing a complex solution, no matter what it is, whether it be Lean, Six Sigma, or an AI project, requires your champion to have a deep understanding and understand that it's actually a journey. It's not a drop the software and it works. It's never going to be like that. So if you could paint the picture of, because I think this is important, if people want to, let's say, demystify the hype and understand what they need to do to adopt technology that can have a big impact on their business, there's certain things that they need to do as well, the right mindset, technology, people, etc. So if you could paint the perfect champion company for DataProphet to approach, what would that look like?
I'll maybe take this one due to the role I have in the company as well. There's a bit of a irony in this encapsulated. The companies that needs us the most, meaning that needs to optimize or reduce scrap, is most likely the company that's the least ready, not always, but prototypically for this kind of solution. The companies that's well-versed and are operationally mature and fit will fit this journey the best, but the gains that can be made is
less.
Prototypically, you're going to fight for 1% maybe scrap reduction instead of a 10% scrap reduction.
Yeah.
So how do we fit this kind of two extremes, and now we have to fit this layer? So how does a perfect company look? I love the comment you made about, I think was before this, also your time in safety shoes or the boots. I like the concept of dynamic capabilities. Do you as an organization have the ability to change yourself? If you have that attribute, it doesn't really matter what technology or means you use, because you have the ability to create capability.
Yes.
Because if you bought a new air compressor, new machine, and you people start to use it in a quick and effective way, it means you can change the way you did things today from yesterday. If you have a compressor and they still don't use it because they like to the old way of doing things, that's a warning light. That's a warning or red flag in this customer. It's a customer that has the ability to adopt new ways of doing work, but also have the change to transform the way they do things and also foster new capabilities. I don't really care about their starting position because it's always going to be a journey.
Yeah.
But if you have those attributes, that's a perfect company, because they acknowledge and they foster that fitness to change themselves.
I'm going to ask you a loaded question. When you're sitting in front of a customer, what are those traits that give you the impression that they have the ability to change? Because I think you've hit the nail on the head, because no matter what change might look like, it's still the ability to change.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to change, you can then create the talent, the skills required.
Yeah.
But it's everyone says they can change.
Yeah.
But in reality, as you mentioned, the probably the organizations that need you the most are the ones that are least able to change, even though they believe they can.
Yeah.
So the loaded question is, if you're sitting across the table from a potential customer, what are those questions that you would ask that so I'm prepping your future customers here so that they can listen to this and answer correctly.
And that's also a nice thing. If you go out to research and change, or the concept of change management is not a new thing. Just because it's AI in its essence, it doesn't change. So what we do like to do is approach it with, we typically use the Kotter model. And in there, if you just think of the 8 steps of the Kotter model, the first one is just, do you have leadership buy-in? Do you have buy-in from people? How do they plan to communicate it? If a leader starts talking to me and already talks about his plan, what a vision of it is, and how he's going to communicate it, and why it's necessary, that's 3 big signs that, at least on that layer of the organization, it's been done.
Yep.
And next thing I like to do is to ask a customer, typically is a bit of my test I like to do is, what's the big changes you're doing right now? And then when we walk to the shop floor, ask the people on the floor, what's the big things you're busy with?
Yeah.
And you can see where there's a match in initiatives or not. That communication between the layers of the organization, crucial to that. So there's a few steps you can see. And then also systemically, we saw today also a nice thing is, show me, we have a survey we asked also as well, tell us tangible examples where institutionalized knowledge or event happened and how did you prevent it from happening again. If you have fostered a healthy continuous improvement mindset that's efficient and effective, that's a great sign.
Yep.
If you have a great PDCA plan with a lot of items and it's marked as done, but you don't know what the result of it is, that's a red flag.
That's a tick box exercise.
Then it's a tick box exercise. So that's typically the stuff I try and uncover with customers as well.
Yeah.
Because I call it operational fitness. What's their operational fitness? And I typically lean heavily on the PDCA or continuous. It doesn't need to be PDCA, but
Yeah.
how
The
do I
mindset, right?
have you fostered that capability to improve yourself?
Yeah.
Because this is just a tool that you're going to use to improve yourself. So
Yeah.
if you leverage in that way,
Yeah.
and I think we mentioned Atlantis, I think that's a great example of a company that really embodies that mindset. And it's also a mental model of, where can I get information that's relevant to make us health better? How do we make sure it checks out?
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, so there's probably 2 areas I'd look at. So for any change like this, I mean, you need senior sponsorship, right?
Yeah.
So you need the CEO, or you need one of the VPs or one of the directors to have bought into the AI thing. They understand don't have to understand AI in detail, but they understand the risks and the benefits of AI. And you were talking about it earlier on today. They understand their processes in detail, and that's what this slide talks to. So you have to go down into your processes, look for the bottlenecks, and for that you need to understand your processes and understand where the bottlenecks are. The second thing, so that's on the personalities I'm talking to. If I talk about the company, it's typically a company that knows lean or world-class manufacturing, knows it, but not, you don't have to be completely mature, because as Johan says, the very mature guys have their own data science departments and they're doing their own thing. But one of the big pillars, or one of the big drivers, or one of the big supporting elements of world-class manufacturing is change management. So when I talk to a company and they understand the principles of world-class manufacturing, then I know they understand how to do change. And if they understand how to do change, then they can adopt things like AI and 4IR. And the reason is because you're going to be changing things like SOPs, KPI. They've got to have a very good goal-setting process. And then they've got to have a very good process where they create KPIs, assign the KPIs, align the KPIs in the organization to that strategy. And does AI talk to that strategy? In other words, have they thought through, okay, one of my corporate objectives is to reduce cost. How is AI going to help that? So you've got to know the process in detail. You've got to know how the KPIs affect the value chain right at the floor, and then be able to whittle that all the way up. And then think about what the changes in the organization are going to be to do that. So changes in processes, SOPs, as I said, KPIs, standard work practices, level 1, 2, 3 meetings. So that's kind of the perfect customer. If you talking to a customer who doesn't know those principles, you're going to find change very difficult. And then again, if the personalities haven't adopted or aware of the benefits of AI, and they're more focused on the operational priorities, then they're probably not ready either.
Well, I think listening to Aaron now as well, and I think you mentioned it earlier as well, it's not an install and walk away.
No, it's not. It's a journey.
If you have a customer that has that perception, that's almost the biggest red flag. Because then it's something happened, but nothing is happening. Where are we at? And this is a mindset. It's a mental model change that's required with this. And this needs leadership support to get to the state. It's not just the technology. It's a different way to think about a simple aspect as data. It's a mental model shift that's required. And if you don't have that buy-in from leadership to help drive the mental model that's need to be rewired in his organization or her organization, it's going to be a tough journey.
The reason why that resonates with me is, as you know, we also try to build a digital business. And in the a couple of years ago, we were trying to sell to everyone, because obviously you got this cool thing and you want to get out to market. So anyone that you knocked on the door, they should be buying because the product is so good, and you do your best to convince them. Some people buy it, some people don't. But I think we've matured in that we now look for customers that understand, that have the ability to change, as you say. Else, we put a lot of effort up front, and you can't build a viable business on that. Were there any more slides?
No, there's just two more. I mean, let's just discuss. I mean, remember I spoke about the senior stakeholders, doing a strategic assessment and trying to figure out how AI might help that. But something we were talking about earlier on was then you need a set of use cases. And you need to delve into the process, look for the bottlenecks. People, do the Gemba walks, talk to the guys on the floor. They know where the bottlenecks are. Then create a business case and work out what the ROI is, validate that use case, and almost prioritize those use cases based on feasibility and impact on the corporate objectives, so cost reduction or improved output or whatever the case is, and then look at your data. Without data, you're not going to have anything. And then start small. There's all this stuff around pilot purgatory. Although that's true, you've got to start small, and we talk about the journey. If you start small and you start with a pilot, you start to understand the challenges technologically, but also organizationally. So it's a lot of this is a people thing.
Yeah.
And then all I was going to say is that we then, once we've got through those two stages, so you've got AI in your strategy and your technology roadmap, you've got a bunch of use cases that have been prioritized. Then we do a maturity assessment, and that maturity assessment, you asked about the perfect company, is extremely important. And so the idea here is to assess the gap. So how mature or immature is the potential customer, and can you close those gaps and mitigate the risks? If you can't, then you probably shouldn't be doing 4R or AI.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that slide just touches on the areas we would look at from maturity assessment.
It's such an important thing, especially when you see that the organization will benefit the most. To walk away from them is such a difficult,
Yeah.
Oh, but it's also always the principle: match the right solution to right problem.
Yeah.
If your problem is, let's say, on a data traceability level, that's very important to know that.
Yeah.
There's no point in selling a reduction or something if that's and then also change. So it's not necessarily walk away from a customer, but bring the appropriate solution. If it's not on our sphere, here's a partner that can help you possibly, but also we also have very good edge solutions and all of that can help to fix those gaps. But then acknowledge that we first have to go through this journey to fix those gaps before we get to the nice optimized and AI solutions and that.
Yeah.
And that's also, it is important to be realistic around the expectations given your position in the maturity assessment.
And I think that's why picking the right, as you mentioned, the right initial use case with a clear KPI, where you can map out the journey a little bit more practically and realistically, and to see how difficult it is for the people to change. Because you can do the technical stuff and create the model and say, here are the settings.
Yeah.
If the people don't adopt it, then it's almost like you actually haven't achieved the KPI.
Good point.
Yeah. Was there another presentation? It's just,
No, that's
just the
pretty
one,
much it.
Maybe this last slide, I'll jump into this one. This is just my favorite way to contextualize this journey that we keep on talking about. So on the y-axis, obviously KPIs or something that needs to be achieved, and I'll delve into that a bit. And then the x-axis, you can actually call a lot of concepts as well, but just in simple excellence in work practices. So that can be people, process, systems in a different way, basically. What is the irony of doesn't matter what change it is, the hardest yards is between step 1 and 2. And this is typically where we as organizations and people will give up on the journey as well.
Yeah.
Because we realize now for us to foster this, doesn't matter if it's AI driven or what, it's where the hard yards is put down.
Yeah.
This is the changing of behavior, mental models, it's the leadership buy-in, it's the Kotter model, it's change management, it's all of that. It's only once you've changed that you open up this possibility to get the gains. And a simple, tangible example of this is, let's also take maybe the Atlantis use case. Now you have this optimized recipe. At point 2, only 10% of your operators is following the recipe.
Yeah.
How do you get 80% or 90% or all your shifts, point 4, to follow the same recipe? Or use that control plan values and actually get the results. And that's the hard part.
That is the hard part. Well, I think, like you said, I think step 1 to 2 is the hardest part, like you say.
Yeah.
And ironically, that's where if you look at a global goal of this business case, you might not see the KPIs immediately. But don't underestimate the value on a work practices axis that's been added. And that's a harder thing to quantify. And that makes for you as a business leader, that makes the decision a bit harder.
Yes.
Does it not? Because show me the value. But yes, we've improved greatly, but you don't see the immediate gains from that.
That's why I think the leaders that understand the process can understand the value. It may not have resulted in dollars yet, which is what everyone understands.
Yeah.
But if people can see the process is improving, that will eventually translate to optimization in the bottom line.
And this is true. And if you look at what valuable is, it's sustainable achievement of excellence.
Yeah. Sustainable.
And that's the thing, because we can do a test run quickly and have a great pilot this control plan. Everybody's paying attention. Oh, you get a great reduction in scrap. Great. Do it tomorrow, the week after that, do it 6 months after that.
Can't repeat it.
Very different problem than doing it for one shift.
Yeah.
It's 2 intrinsically different problems to solve for.
Yeah.
And this goes back to your white paper. So this is a graphic by Ed Koch.
Okay, yeah.
He's the previous head of world-class manufacturing at SAB Miller.
Yeah.
He's now with a company called competitive capabilities international, CCI.
That's the CCI.
Yeah, and to your point around the white paper, this is really the convergence of WCM and 4IR.
Yeah.
So as Johan's saying, you're striving for excellence in KPIs. If you go to maintainable results, you could reach those KPIs next year, but the year after that, it's not sustainable. You don't know how you got there, and you don't know how to do it. But manufacturers also look at excellence in work practices, and they understand that that's as important as the KPI, because that gives you the sustainability.
Exactly.
So to your question earlier on around the perfect client, is somebody who also understands that work practices and improving those work practices is a journey, and it's as important as improving the KPIs. You've got to get improvement in both axes to reach manufacturing excellence. And there's nothing different there's a lot different between WCM and 4IR, but you're striving for the same things.
Yeah.
And so if a client understands this and understands the journey, then we have a perfect client.
And just to maybe again to contextualize our value add, the way I see it is, the journey is going to stay similar for any entity or problem or business case to some extent. Is how do you accelerate the journey?
Yeah.
And that's through leveraging the technology and the capabilities we provide as DataProphet.
Yeah.
Because the journey is going to remain, it's not going to change because it's AI.
No.
But we can make the journey less strainful, faster, accelerated, make sure we identify the 20% and makes the 80% difference a lot sooner. Because if you expend that effort on x-axis and it doesn't yield results, that's a very disappointing result. And that's that resource-based view of the firm. Manufacturing as a whole, you don't have the luxury of spending resources, time and money on something that's not going to bring results.
One thing I didn't anticipate in our digital journey as Genomark is the cost of educating for that gap.
Yeah.
As an organization trying to sell the solution, we understand the theory, but how you fit that theory and get potential customers to understand how it fits together is an education step, which doesn't exist in the marketplaces because it's new, right? Like we spoke about, everyone thinks that it's 4IR versus lean, but it's not.
It's not.
But how you educate people to realize that 4IR actually helps lean is a cost to educate. So that's why I think businesses like ours have to spend a lot more on educating customers as opposed to selling the product.
Yeah.
It's a big part of it. I just wanted to go back to the map because I wanted to ask a question on, yes, you guys are born out of Cape Town, Atlantis Foundries. What's it like doing business around the world as an African organization selling technology? Just would be interesting to get your perspective.
Yeah.
If you go to Germany, the US, China, Japan, India, they're known for technology, but they're not known for buying technology from Africa. So I just wanted to get your guys' perspective because that's a really cool global footprint.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I can talk about the sales side first.
Yeah, I'll jump about the after service side.
I mean, there are countries abroad in different continents far north, and they don't even think twice about, AI coming out of Africa.
Yeah.
But they're often surprised when they see the good results that come out of it. So I think that's the difficulty. I mean, and then I'll hand over to Jan. From an implementation perspective, I think if you look at Africa and South Africa, a lot of the manufacturers are at the data stage. So how do we integrate like the PLCs and the sensors and all of that on the factory floor to extract the data and create the unified view that we create? A lot of them are still at that stage. Yeah. A lot of them are at the stage where they don't have PLCs, they don't have controllers, they don't, or else they have a lot, but they're very old. Yeah. So they're still in that phase of creating the data that's used for the AI. Whereas if you go further north to the US and to Europe, a lot of them are already starting to think about that foundational stage that you spoke about. Yeah. And then it's a little bit easier to talk about things like prescriptive analytics and predictive analytics. Although there are pockets in Africa. Yeah. I mean, we're doing work now with a global beverage manufacturer. And so they understand this, and they're at the stage where they already have the data. And so we're in the optimization stage. So it varies by country.
Yep.
But I think to summarize, it's a massive surprise that somebody out of Africa can do what we're doing.
No, for sure. I think it's a massive surprise that from anywhere.
Yeah.
Because zero quality defects in a foundry is not. I think most people don't appreciate what that actually means. It's like massive.
Yeah.
Massive thing.
Yeah, we're talking to an American customer who said it is exactly that. So to achieve that is an extremely difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
So and he said to us, he says it's surprising that it's come out of South Africa. So yeah, we're starting to talk to them. But what's great is we have the results, and that gives us the credibility to do business
all over
further north.
I think also just from a fit for purpose, not fit for purpose is the wrong term, but necessity is the mother of innovation. I think also in South Africa we can see that as a obviously downside, contextually, environmentally, but it's also our greatest strength in the sense that if we just look at our local customers, we have such an array of challenges. And if you think about manufacturing in its purest form, I call it a noise damper. You have your upstream supply chain that has noise and variance in it. Then downstream, your customers will tell you all of a sudden, I need 50 more of this or 1 million more of that or whatever. And you have to, through systems and processes, dampen out the noise on both sides and have a uniform output. South Africa, the challenge sometimes even a bit more than it needs to be. But that's a great testing ground for the feasibility of a technology in that. And also, when we do use South Africa to a large extent as a sandbox, and it's a great sandbox. Ironically, what do you find if you're going globally? We think we're so unique in our challenges as South Africa, but I find in engaging with a lot of our customers, yes, it's sometimes a bit from a different nature, but it's intrinsically the same problems and challenges. Human nature doesn't change due to boundaries and country to some extent. What does become apparent is obviously different labor markets, different requirements, different kind of priorities, and that does come. But I think from a credibility point of view, the way we're able to get this footprint is two things. We do have a strategic partner in Europe that we also distribute through, but the best one is word of mouth of your customers. And if you get involved in your customer, it gives you that credibility. It gives you the gateway to, yes, you're from South Africa, but listen, this works, and this is how we did it, and this is great. And that's how you open up that market. That's for us, or especially my job. If your customer recommends you to their global group, then that's the biggest victory we can have as a South African company operating a South African company.
Well done, guys. That's like massive. Really, really well done.
Oh, thank you. I mean, South Africa's a great launch pad as well for global. So what we've learned over the years is they like to use Africa or South Africa as a lighthouse and almost implement, I spoke about pilot projects, almost implement that in Africa or South Africa and then scale. And then South Africa has I think a particular problem around assets and we all know about interest rates and the cost of capex. So it's very difficult, say, for South African manufacturers or even African manufacturers to expand on capacity. And one of the things they can use is 4R and things like our AI to improve. From a capacity perspective, Johan talks about it as, I think, the extra factory or the hidden factory. So without having to build another factory, you can actually get that additional capacity out of your factory. So that unique problem in Africa and South Africa also is a great starting point for something like AI. So there's the lighthouse effect, and then there's scale globally, and then there's the use of technology to get more capacity, which would otherwise be very expensive.
And I want to also come up for South African industry, obviously to some extent, is we sometimes think ourselves to be less than the international competitors. We have world-class manufacturers in South Africa as well. And I mean, we talked about two different, you get them in South Africa, the two different customers, you get them overseas as well. There's no real, from that point of view, no distinction. But it is obviously South Africa. Luckily with Europe, it's an easy market, time zones, but also I think you allude to the credibility question of how do we as South Africans, not known for the forefront of manufacturing technology, play in the space. And I think your business had to crack that same not to
Yeah,
a large
we-
extent.
It's exactly the same story, maybe a little bit earlier, working with South African customers that helped us.
Oh.
That were international, multinationals, that then gave us a door somewhere else, and then the story continued.
Yeah.
I actually think I have a belief that in developing countries, these kinds of technologies have a bigger opportunity.
Right.
Because you talked about institutional knowledge, and skills is one of the biggest challenges in developing countries. And if you can have models that contain the skills, you can enable somebody, a human somewhere in a rural point in Africa, together with the model and the human capability to run a production facility.
Yeah.
So I think the broader opportunity for our technologies is actually less so in the developed world. They can afford it, but it's that 2-3% gain, right? Generally speaking. But I think in Africa, Southeast Asia, South America, where you have an abundance of people, maybe limited skills, the gap is actually technology.
Yep. Exactly.
That's at least what I think. We'll see what actually materializes. The problem is capital to deploy the technology in these developing countries. What is the most one customer story that you have that you're most proud of because of the impact that you've had on their business? Apart from Atlantis, because I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a big one.
For me, I'll jump on it. For me, it is satisfying. We spoke, maybe this will be in the first part of the podcast, but wherever it comes in, is we show that journey for a customer to go there. For me, it's when I see that mindset change, and then you talked about education as a key component of what we actually have to do at this stage of this technology and advancement as well. If I see that penny drop moments of, but listen, this is not a plug and play solution, but this is a ethos, way of thinking, way of working change. And they start to see that possibilities that it can bring. That for me is the most satisfying thing.
Okay.
And we've cracked that nut at a few customers. And it's also another very satisfying moment is when you realize it's not just whatever stage you're at in the journey, it's not necessarily where the value is at. It's let's bring the context to the problem and solve for that. Because it's also fun in the journey to sometimes change the destination.
Of course.
And that for me is also once we really realize what we're doing here, the destination might change. And that's fine.
That's
and
awesome.
that's for me very cool if a customer has that maturity to make those calls as well.
That's awesome. That kind of why you fight through the battles, right? That sense of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I'm really proud of as DataProphet is so typically we would start on a sub process or a small process. You achieve the success, and then the client has said to us, okay, well, let's do the process end to end. So you're having this 5% effect on waste, or it might be a cycle time, or whatever the case is. And now they want to scale throughout the entire process and potentially then globally. And scalability is a big thing.
Yep.
And it talks to that journey. So you've got to get through that journey around the small sub process and achieve success there, and then you can unlock the same value in a repetitive way throughout the rest of the group. So there's plants all over the world. So again, the journey to the point we were making early on goes back to the problem, and then so it's an iterative thing. And I think what I'm most proud of is holding the customer's hand in that journey and having us as a partner to realize this iterative process.
That's awesome, man. Well done, guys.
And for me also, and sorry, it's now a bit, but I cannot help talking about it. If you think about what most operations solve for, it's either capability of your process problem or stability of the process problem.
Yeah.
And stability is the first foundation you need before you can even talk about capability.
Yeah.
And a lot of customers, we go back and say, but listen, we're solving for a stability problem. Optimized ranges is not what you're solving for. If you cannot achieve 0.3 in your operations sustainably, how can you even ask the question, is 0.3 the right one?
Yeah, 100%.
Simple example. And that's what are we solving for? And we have the tools and the methodologies, but let's solve the right problem. Again,
the power of standard deviation.
Yeah.
Just keep it.
Descriptive analytics is very powerful in its own right.
Yeah.
Sometimes no need to go deeper than that. So.
Hiram, Johan, thank you very much for the fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot. I can't say congratulations enough. Because I'm fortunate to have traveled the world, seen lots of factories around the world, and I've seen over the last 10 years the hype and all the talk, but not often practical outcomes on the ground. And the few plants that I visited that have adopted DataProphet's journey, it's not a product, the DataProphet journey.
It's a journey.
I've seen significant improvements and outputs at the end of the day. So well done, congratulations. That's really amazing to see.
No, thank you, and thanks for having us. And it takes one to see one, right? So you've been around for 30 years, and from our plant walk this morning, you guys have achieved like really good things. Goes back to the South African thing that we can
Thanks a lot.
do.
It's as I'm sure with you guys, 10 steps forward, 20 steps back, another 10s forward, and it's kind of this.
Yeah.
But like you say, this ability to change, right? It's that mindset, that culture in an organization that allows you to keep going, keep changing, keep going, keep changing, and not being too proud to realize you made a mistake.